So, in a discussion about EVs and how they might impact the demand for gasoline in the United States, this person says the number one selling car in the world is an EV. The global transition is coming much faster than people think. So, what does that mean, though? Like, what does that mean? What are the tangible results of that? Because that's what's important, right? So first of all, in the United States, because this was a discussion about gas prices, but this is going to lead into a discussion about climate change. In the United States, the fact that an EV is the number one selling car globally means absolutely nothing for our gas prices. And that is because that is not impacting our supply and demand dynamic in the United States, because an EV is not the number one selling car in the United States, or number two, or number three, or number four. There's one EV in the top 10. The top 3 selling cars are all pickups. China is the reason that there is a Tesla as the number one selling car in the world. And I'm going to get to that impact on climate change in a minute. But before, I want to finish up on gas prices. And I'm going to relate this to book sales. Yeah. You see, I wrote a book that made the bestseller list. But you know what? That's not hard to do. Do you know why? Because you don't have to sell very many books to make the bestseller list. Do you know why? Because nobody fucking reads anymore. Yeah. And you know what else people don't do anymore? Buy new cars. Yeah. Look at the bottom. That's how many new cars we sell today. Less than a third of what we sold in the 80s. Yeah. Which is above me. Yeah. My point is, if all of the new cars sold were EVs, it wouldn't have that big of an impact because we just don't sell that many new cars anymore. Like, it would take decades for that to matter. Now, I want to be really clear about something. I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade about EV sales. But when we look at statistics, it is very important that we break them down and understand what that means, what the tangible results of those statistics are, what that means for climate change, what that means for gas prices. Because that's what's really important, right? That is what matters. And I'm about to continue that in this video, so stick with me. So just to summarize real quick on gas prices in the United States, how it relates to our refining capacity and how EVs would impact our refining capacity. The fact that we just don't sell a lot of new cars in the United States anymore only means it's going to be that much more difficult for EVs to have a real impact on our supply and demand for gas in the United States. If the top 10 selling cars in the United States were all EVs from now on, in 10 years, about 15% of the cars in the United States would be EVs. Do you understand? Okay, yes. Now let's go to climate change. Now, the reason the EV is the number one selling car in the world, specifically the Model Tesla Y, is because of China. And China's buying a lot of EVs. Now, on the top screen here, on that top graph, that shows China's energy consumption by source. And their source is mainly coal. If you buy a new EV and all of the electricity generated to charge it is done with coal, you might as well be driving a gas guzzler, because it makes absolutely no difference. None whatsoever. So from a climate change perspective, you have all these EVs being sold in China where they rely on so much coal. It's not going to have any impact on climate change, since the vast majority of those EVs are charged with electricity that is made by burning coal, which is the absolute dirtiest fossil fuel on the planet by far. Now, this chart is very misleading, but this shows energy consumption by coal in the United States down here on the bottom, and by China up there on the top. Now, here's what's misleading about this. In the United States, our energy consumption is not skyrocketing. So this big downward trend in coal use in the United States is a really good thing for the climate. But that China graph is very misleading because it shows as a percentage of their electricity generation, coal is dropping. In the United States, that means we're using less coal. In China, it doesn't. They're using more coal. Their energy demand is rising at a rate faster than they can create energy basically in China. And they are using a ton of renewable energy and natural gas to make up for that. And they're just about there where basically everyone has electricity. They're just about to get there. But like I said, don't let this graph fool you, because that doesn't mean China's using less coal. They're actually using significantly more coal. They are just creating so much energy that they are creating with other sources. They're still adding more coal energy. They're building hundreds of coal plants a year in China. And this is why it's so important when you look at stuff like this to actually understand what it means. And you got to dig deeper. You got to get down in the weeds with this stuff and figure out what it means from, like, what are the tangible results, right? Carbon emissions in the United States have been dropping for 20 years. Pretty good, pretty healthy drops. But globally, carbon emissions are still rising every single year. And most of that is because of China and India. And here's what you have to understand about China. Once they get to the point where basically 100% of their population has access to electricity, which they're pretty much at right now, I think they're at like 98%, so they're almost there. Once they get there, their mix of energy is pretty much going to stay the same. Yeah. Which means their carbon emissions are not going to go down. They're still going to use like nearly 4 times more coal. And I think it's more than 4 times more coal than the United States does. It's probably like 5 or 6 times. So we're going to get to a place where the United States and Europe and, you know, a lot of major places where a lot of people live are going to have fairly clean energy portfolios. We're going to get to that spot. And it's not going to matter one bit. It is not going to matter one bit. Because when we get there, the 2 most populated countries in the world will still be the 2 dirtiest places in the world. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do whatever we can. It's just the reality of the situation. It's just the reality of it. That's how it works. Sorry for the long video. I know it was long, but I had a lot to say. You know what I mean? I had a lot to say. Thanks.